Coming up on this week's show, news about the possible final days of our favourite soccer TV channel. Peacock tightens the grip on Premier League fans once again. We debate how the MLS Cup Final TV ratings did. How streaming numbers are going through the roof. Plus, we have letters from you, the listeners, in our mailbag section. I'm Christopher Harris, aka The Gaffer, joined alongside my co-host, Kartik Krishnaiyer. Kartik, it's that time of the year. I mean, it's kind of that wonderful time of the season with games galore, and we're recording this on Wednesday night, probably releasing the podcast on Thursday morning. So, but this week, I mean, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, games galore from across Europe, from Germany, from England, from I think from Spain. They got Copa del Rey games as well as La Liga games. And then you've got, of course, Copa Libertadores, you've got CONCACAF Champions League. And actually the last couple of weeks, well, actually the last week that we've been watching soccer, it's been a fantastic week. We've had the South Wales Derby last weekend, the MLS Cup Final, the race for the Premier League title, the Liga MX playoff final. Lots of upsets over the weekend. Some big teams being defeated by some middle table or less lower league table sides. You had, of course, as I mentioned, the frenzy of the midweek games. We've got the return of Goal Rush this week, and much more. But what for you was your favourite out of everything that you've seen this past week?
I guess I would say the best performance I saw was from Stuttgart against Borussia Dortmund. Yeah, that was this week, right? And then Lucien Favre got sacked right after that match. That they were spectacular, going to Dortmund, getting 5 goals, and really and obviously getting the manager sacked. My favorite match was probably Fulham and Liverpool, because I've been studying what Scott Parker has been doing the last several weeks with this Fulham team. What happened was they got promoted. I think most of us preferred Brentford to come up because they had a better side. They had really exciting attacking players, and 2 of them, Watkins and Barry have now been sold into the Premier League, just to go with all the other really good Brentford players from the last few years, Sawyers, the Maupay, etc., Konsa, that have been sold upward. So Fulham, though, the last 4 or 5 weeks, I've been really intrigued by, because there was a not much talked about spending spree right before the transfer deadline. And Fulham were, the first few weeks of the season, they looked like they might be one of the worst teams in Premier League history, right? I think everybody could agree on that they looked, and that's what I thought when they got promoted over Brentford. I thought Brentford was a side that would compete in the Premier League with the players they had, would sign some new guys, had a new ground coming online. What a disaster that Fulham had come up instead of them. So what we saw was Parker overhauled the squad without much notoriety or discussion. Right now, I think they have 1 or 2 guys starting for the team that were starting at the beginning of the season when they got crushed by Arsenal. Now, if they played Arsenal, I think the result would probably be very different. And they were fantastic for much of that match against Liverpool. And so I couldn't take my eye off that match. Tactically, there's something very interesting. I guess Parker, maybe because he's English, because of his reputation as a holding midfield player, we had made the assumption when he moved into management he would be a very negative Sam Allardyce, Tony Pulis style, or the reputations that Allardyce and Pulis both have. I don't know that the reputations are necessarily deserved, but that style manager, what we're seeing, and he certainly was that way in the championship last season. Fulham were unwatchable at times. But what we're seeing now, Chris, is a really interesting dynamic where he's got guys that are athletic. He's got guys that can play on the break, but he also has brought in a couple guys that can play in the midfield and keep the ball and pass the ball around nicely. They played a high line against Liverpool, which no one should do, you would think, and not only got away with it, but thrived on it. I mean, probably should have gotten all 3 points in that match. So that was my favorite match to watch, because I just really liked what Fulham did, and I like what Fulham are doing in general right now. Yeah,
and that one was a rare treat because we had Ian Darke on the commentary on this one on NBCSN. But do you think the fans...
Oh, sorry, that was part of it, Chris.
Yeah.
I meant to tweet that during the match, but I was so captivated with what Parker was doing. How much? So maybe we took it for granted because we heard him so much, particularly in the U.S. How much I enjoyed his call of that match.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you too, because I definitely enjoyed his call, but I just wonder if the fans at Craven Cottage made a difference. And the reason I ask that too is because the game before that was Crystal Palace against Spurs, which was one of the games of the weekend. And again, the Palace fans at Selhurst Park in full voice. The day before we had the Everton Chelsea game, and I think the fans at Goodison Park made a difference in that game. But I don't know. To me, I think it is the instance or the case where the home fans in these stadiums, where they're allowed, are making a difference, where the players kind of rise the levels up just a little bit. Do you agree or disagree?
On those two matches, for sure. I think Fulham, it's been a progression. Obviously, maybe took a step back in midweek, not scoring against Brighton, but it's been a progression where they got to that point where they were able to go toe-to-toe with Liverpool. But having 2,000 fans at the Cottage, and the Cottage acoustically, I think we've all been to the Cottage, right? A lot of the listeners to this show also. Acoustically, 2,000 fans in that ground will sound a lot louder than 2,000 fans at Old Trafford or at Villa Park. So it felt like, I don't want to say it felt like a full house at the Cottage, but it kind of did, right? Selhurst is another loud ground, actually. So those two matches, yeah, that's a great shout, Chris. Those two matches having fans, I think, made a big difference in how we felt about those matches and how the matches played out. And my complaint about the coverage of this is there was some really good analysis from NBC this week that we'll get into about Liverpool and Spurs and Man City and Chelsea, etc. But when it came to talking about Fulham, they still don't want to do it. They don't want to analyze Parker's tactics and how Fulham have really kind of changed the way they're playing. I think Musto got a little bit into it, but not the way he would if he wasn't given the time, clearly, that he would if it were Manchester United that we were talking about. So, yeah, I enjoyed that match. And I have to say, you make a great point. The Palace-Spurs match, that's probably high on the list as well.
So my favorite match from this past week was Liverpool against Spurs. Really high level from the get-go, from the start. Just I was surprised, actually. I thought Spurs were going to really park the bus on this one. But they had chances. They had chances to win this game, as did Liverpool. Liverpool capitalized on those chances and ultimately won the game 2-1. What was interesting in this one, I thought, was that there was some good post-match analysis from Tim Howard and Robbie Mustoe alongside Liam McHugh. I watched this game just for a change of pace. I watched this game on as part of Goal Rush, which is available on Peacock TV. In Goal Rush, for those who haven't watched it, it's a whip-around show, just like the Golasso show, just like Zone of Football, just like Multi-Match 90 back in the day from Fox. And we haven't seen Goal Rush in a very long time. And the reason being is that there's been, from basically last summer through till now, most of the Premier League matches have been staggered kickoffs. And it's been rare that you have more than two games on at the same time. So this week was a perfect timing to have that. And it's on Peacock TV, so it was on Tuesday and Wednesday. But what it provides you is a whip-around show, but usually they focus on one of the games. And in this case, they focused on Liverpool against Spurs. And we have a different commentary team. So I got to hear, I think it was Dan O'Hagan and Don Hutchinson do the Liverpool-Spurs game. And then as goals went in the other matches, they would break away for maybe like 10 or 20 seconds and come right back. So for me, it was a breath of fresh air, just not having the usual, Olo or Graham Lusso, kind of just a different take on the same match. And it was a fantastic game from start to finish. Yeah,
so the post-match on NBC I thought was really good, which we haven't said that a lot about NBC this year, but Liam McHugh, very good host, and I feel like I like Ahmed Farina. I want to give him props for Friday. Maybe when we go into our match review, I want to give him props for that. But I feel like maybe NBC felt like they need to bring in a big gun at the network for this match, for these midweek fixtures. So Liam McHugh, who is one of their better presenters for all sports at NBC, he's in that presenter's chair alongside Tim Howard and Robbie Mustoe. And they were talking tactics in a way they generally have not this year, or for about a year and a half on the show. And I think Tim Howard made the best point of all, saying because Jose always has a wrinkle for these big matches. I mean, we all remember what he did with Inter in the Champions League in 2010 with these strange formations and guys playing out of position, etc. And then he had done it several times after that at Madrid, and then most notably, I think recently, Manchester United against Conte's Chelsea in that match at Old Trafford, which United smash and grab 1-2-0 against the champions, Chelsea, who were unbeatable that season after a certain point. He did it again today. But Howard pointed out something that I hadn't thought about, because I thought it was really interesting, and was talking to people during the game, texting with some of my friends, WhatsApping, saying this is really neat what he's doing with kind of the wide midfielders, the really good, the guys that you would think would be in the middle, Sissoko, even Bergwijn being wide, and trying to negate the pace of Alexander-Arnold and Robertson coming up the flanks. Really smart. What I had not thought about until Tim Howard mentioned it was, if Spurs play their normal way, it's Son on the end of those two chances and not Bergwijn. And let's be honest, chances are Son takes one or both of those, and
for sure.
Spurs win.
Right.
So I thought that was the most incredible point I had heard on an NBC studio show all season. So good job from Tim Howard, and great job from Liam McHugh and Robbie Mustoe getting that out. And now that I've thought about that and processed that, I'm like, oh my goodness, maybe Jose overthought it. Because I thought Jose had done a brilliant job with the tactic, but then you realize that's where Son normally plays.
It was definitely Tim Howard's one of his better moments this season thus far, and he's been hit and miss, as we've discussed. But yeah, I agree. On Wednesday, post-match, he was on form, and he had a different opinion than Arlo White. So Arlo White post-match, which actually, Kartik, I have to ask you this. So I have my opinion, but I want to get your opinion. What's your opinion about lead commentators having an opinion and sharing their opinions?
I am not in love with it, because I think it may indicate a certain degree of bias when they call matches or analyze matches. Now, in fairness to Arlo White, because I did watch that segment with Graham Lasso and have a completely different take, which was, I think Spurs had more good chances in this match.
Totally.
And I think they should have won. That's my opinion.
Yep.
Now, I know Liverpool fans are going to come after me for that. That's my opinion. Now, Arlo White had a completely different opinion and was very dismissive of Mourinho's post-match rant, which we knew was coming, right? But yeah, I don't like it, Chris, but I have to kind of put a caveat on that by saying Arlo White doesn't show me any bias, even when he calls Leicester matches. So I have to give him credit for that. But no, I didn't agree with him about that, and he was very animated about it, which sort of surprised me.
Yeah, in his match commentary, I don't think he shows bias. But if you're a Tottenham Hotspur fan and you listen to what Arlo says at post-match, now most Spurs fans I would think would disagree with him, but he said, Jose has a very different way of trying to win games, kind of hinting at his pragmatic style, which he has. And Arlo went on to say that he was basically in disbelief that Jose thought that Spurs were the better team in this match. And like you, I agree that actually Spurs had the better chances to win this match. Yes, Liverpool had chances too, and they missed theirs. But the opportunity for Spurs to win this game, I think, was greater than that of Liverpool, even with Liverpool playing a better style of play, more attacking, more fluid. At the end of the day, there is no right or a wrong way to play football. It's whatever is most effective, and that can change game to game. And there's nothing wrong with a route one or a pragmatic style or park the bus or whatever the style of play, or attacking or open or whatever it may be. Me personally, I don't like lead commentators being critical or being sharing their opinions. To me, I'd rather them be almost like a Martin Tyler, where Martin, if you ask him a question, he'll give both sides and will say, well, some people are thinking this and some people are saying that, but he's not the type of opinionated person that's going to say, okay, I think that Spurs hint are not winning games or playing games the right way. So yeah, one other thing, Kartik, I noticed this week, which was interesting to me at least, was on Tuesday. At the end of the day, I tuned in to watch ESPN FC, and that Tuesday, there was Premier League matches, well, 2 Premier League matches, bunch of games from France, bunch of games from Italy, bunch of games from Germany, and I haven't watched ESPN FC in a while, but probably the first 20 minutes from start to finish, those 20 minutes were all Bundesliga. It led with Bundesliga. Dan Thomas had a exclusive one-on-one interview post-match with Gio Reyna and Josh Sargent after the Dortmund Werder Bremen game. And it was all in on the Bundesliga. And I haven't been watching ESPN FC, but we haven't seen that much love for the Bundesliga in years.
No, and it's actually kind of the reverse of what had happened on Sunday. I was actually not happy on Sunday when Lucien Favre gets the sack, as I talked about at the beginning of the show with the Stuttgart match. Because of these 2 really good matches we talked about in the Premier League, and then Arsenal, which everybody loves to talk about on these shows, particularly on that show. They love. I think I've been saying that for years. They love to talk about Arsenal and take shots at Arsenal. It was 15, 20 minutes, I want to say, or more before they got even to the Favre news, because they wanted to start with Arsenal losing to Burnley, and then they got into Liverpool and Spurs dropping points, but that was very secondary to Arsenal. So it really depends on kind of like the flavor of the day, what they do, because I didn't watch the Tuesday show yet, but on Sunday they went the other way. They went all in on the Prem because Arsenal had lost and waited for the Bundesliga, even though the biggest news in football that day was from the Bundesliga.
That's interesting. And maybe it's the guests that they have on. There was no Craig Burley. It was Alejandro Moreno and Frank Leboeuf. And they did talk about Chelsea against Wolves a little bit later in the game. I had some good analysis and discussion about that and debate about that. I just thought it was interesting, not having watched that news channel in probably a couple of weeks, but how Bundesliga heavy they are, which if you're the Bundesliga or any of the clubs in the Bundesliga, you got to be like, high five. This is great. This is fantastic exposure. And it's not kind of one of those things where they're just kind of briefly discussing it. They're going in deep, talking about what's happening in the league, etc., etc. I have to ask you, Kartik, because I have not been watching as much of the Bundesliga this season as you have. But when I look at the table, and I see Dortmund in 4th place. And yes, I know that they've gone through a couple of games where they had a couple of disappointing draws. At the same time, Haaland out injured, still recuperating. I look at the table and I go, okay, well, they're actually not doing too bad. Meanwhile, the coach is sacked. So what's the big reason for that? Is it that Dortmund they're not that far behind Bayern in the table?
So before I get to that, I do want to mention, since you mentioned Frank Leboeuf in the Chelsea match, yes, I did watch ESPN FC on Tuesday night because I do remember his analysis of that, which, by the way, was very similar to a conversation I had with a friend earlier that day, which was basically Chelsea don't know when to take the air out of the ball. But you're away from home. Take the point. You're playing a team that's very good, and even though they were down in the table. We know how good Wolves are, and they've had some trouble with injuries, and obviously Moutinho was out for this match, and Jimenez is out indefinitely. But Leboeuf made that point, and I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. I'm glad a former Chelsea player is saying it. That Frank Lampard has to teach his players. Look, at some point you just play a match out. You don't keep attacking, leaving yourself open to a counter. Not only did Wolves score on the winner, but then they almost scored at the death again, right? Yep. When Neto went to the corner and then realized no one was marking him and decided he would put a shot and it hit the frame, I think, or just went over the crossbar, and then the official blew dead. But on Dortmund, I think this is an issue of a club. Speaking of ESPN FC, I think Gab Marcotti and Jurgen Klinsmann both had some really good analysis of it on Sunday. Once they got to talking about it after going through all the Arsenal stuff, that one has too much influence from former players. I've said that for a while about Dortmund. And they're into a certain style, and Mats Hummels came out in the press the day before Favre was sacked and said, we're doing too tiki-taka, trying to play the ball, nice, intricate passing between lines. It doesn't really work for us. And then 2, I think there is a certain arrogance. Marcotti hit on this arrogance, and Marcotti would know because he was in the same room as I was when a director of Borussia Dortmund started mouthing off about how superior they were with their model, their business model, and development of young players at a conference that I attended. And Marcotti was in the very same room as me. In fact, Marcotti may have been, I can't remember if he was, he may have actually been the moderator for that panel. So he would have the same, he was definitely there. Maybe he was the moderator, maybe he was just monitoring another panel. I can't remember. But the point being that there's an arrogance that they feel like they have all these really good young players now, and they've spent money on Emre Can. They brought Hummels back to the club. They've got a core. Meunier has come in from PSG. They've got this core of also Julian Brandt. These guys in their prime that they should be winning the title, and I think that's a bit naive. They have, again, the meddling of directors who are former players. They have Bayern in the same league as they do, and now they have Julian Nagelsmann, who is tactically superior to any coach that Dortmund's going to bring in. Because Dortmund also has a set style, right? So this was something that's interesting about Jurgen Klopp. I know this may not be media related, but I just want to throw this in. Jurgen Klopp, when he took the Liverpool job, and obviously Brendan Rodgers had run afoul with this whole director of football concept, all of that, transfer committee. Klopp said, I can roll with the punches. I can work that way because that's what I had to do with Dortmund. Klopp was very pragmatic and very flexible in terms of being able to work with other people, being involved in the decision-making around football. Now, since Thomas Tuchel was not, he gets sacked, even though, think about it. If Tuchel got sacked at Dortmund, then every manager should get sacked everywhere, right?
Right.
Basically.
Right.
And then, Peter Bosch comes in for a cup of coffee, gets sacked because he's having conflicts with the board. Bosch's team is top of the table right now with Leverkusen. He gets hired by Leverkusen after he gets sacked by Dortmund, and they're overperforming, right? They're performing above their weight. And then now the thing with Favre. I think that there is a difficulty in modern football if you're a manager and you have a set style and you have your own opinions about transfers and about the kind of personnel you want necessarily to work at a place like Dortmund. Right now, I think we're going to have a hard time getting a really high-end coach. I know I've heard Hassan Huttl linked with the job. If I'm him, I stay at Southampton, although there's probably a financial incentive to go to Dortmund, right? I've heard Max Rose linked with the job. Again, a financial incentive notwithstanding, I'd stay with Mönchengladbach if I'm him. So I think that it's a poison chalice, those sorts of jobs. And that's something you'll find more and more in football now, Chris. I think that there are managers who are going to want to work under ideal circumstances. This is why Mauricio Pochettino has not taken a job since he got sacked at Spurs, because I think he wants to find a club where they're not going to meddle. And they're going to let him run the tactical side, the technical direction, the youth program, etc. So I would expect to see more of these kind of sackings at clubs like Dortmund. I think it's a tough job because of their setup.
Yeah, it's interesting too because it's almost like Dortmund's thinking about the brand, and they're thinking, okay, we have a certain style of football, and I've met with Dortmund before too, like some of the executives, and it is that kind of feeling that they think that their club is one of the biggest in the world, and yes, they're big in Asia, especially China. They have a large following there. And that fan base is growing, and there's a lot of appealing things and positive things about Dortmund. But they are not at that level by any means quite yet, and probably a ways off from reaching that.
Yeah, and Marcotti said it on the ESPN FC show that I can't remember his exact words, but basically they're very arrogant. They think that they're the geniuses. They think they're the smartest club in the world, and he's right. And like I said, he was in the same room as I at this Sportel conference a couple of years ago when one of the Dortmund directors mouthed off about how great their club was and how they were superior to Juventus. He was taking shots at Serie A and the setup at Italian clubs, and it turned me off really. And I'm a big Bundesliga guy. But I sat in the back of the room at that conference. What is wrong with this guy? Basically, I mean, there's some sort of insecurity that's making him lash out. Because then he lashed out at English football too. But there was some sort of insecurity making him lash out at the clubs in England and in Italy, while proclaiming Dortmund was effectively the biggest club in the world.
All right, let's move on to TV streaming news. We've got some interesting developments here, and let's have you kick it off, Kartik.
Yeah, so as we talked about last week on Disney Investor Day, they have 86.8 million subscribers and are aiming for 230 to 260 million by November of 2024, which would be 5 years after they launched, right? They launched in November 2019. While ESPN Plus with 11.5 million is aiming for 20 or 30 million, Peacock is currently at 26 million signups, and Peacock you would have to think of kind of as a combination of Disney Plus, Hulu, and ESPN Plus, right? They have all that content in one place.
Yeah, these numbers are basically kind of crazy when you think about it too, because back in the day, right, Fox Soccer Channel, when it was at its height, when people knew it as FSC, back in the 2000s, it was about 30 million subscribers. And what that means is that 30 million households. So you may subscribe to Comcast or I don't know, Charter or whatever cable service or DirecTV, and there's a large portion of those people that subscribe to those cable channels. They have no interest in soccer, but they're still included in that number. And you mentioned, Kartik, like ESPN Plus, 11.5 million right now, and that they're aiming for the 20 to 30 million subscribers. And you know that people subscribing to ESPN Plus are sports crazy. Maybe they're not soccer fans, maybe not all of them, but there's definitely a significant portion of them there too. Disney Plus, 86.8 million subscribers, and they're aiming for 230 to 260 million, which is crazy. And then Peacock at 26 million signups. And I'm sure a significant portion of those have been soccer fans in the US, Premier League fans, and that number seems to be growing. Speaking of Peacock, we broke a story on Sunday. And this is a story that World Soccer Talk had the exclusive on. And this is Peacock TV. Without telling anyone, they went ahead and stopped providing replays of games that originally aired on NBC or NBCSN. So over the last weekend, I think there was the Leeds game that was on against West Ham on Friday. There was the Manchester Derby. And over the weekend, over the Saturday and the Sunday, a lot of Peacock TV subscribers would go into the sports section, and see all the replays, except those games were not available that originally aired on television. And it's a change that Peacock has made, or NBC Sports has made. And what it does, it forces you, if you miss the game live and on television, you will have to. You have to be an NBCSN subscriber or an NBC subscriber to be able to watch that through the NBC Sports app, which makes it confusing too. So there's some games you can only watch on the NBC Sports app unless you DVR'd it, and then the games that are available on replay on Peacock TV are only the games that were shown on Peacock TV originally. So you got two different places where those replays will reside. And at the end of the day, it just makes things more complicated. It makes things more confusing. And actually, bottom line is that at the beginning of the season, Peacock TV and NBC Sports promised people, they said, okay, you will get, by subscribing to Peacock TV, whether it's for per month or for the year, you will get all 380 games available for the season available on replay. And that's out the window. Now they've changed the documentation on their website. It says, I think, 175 games. So, yeah, I mean, there's really nothing positive to come out of this. And I would really, maybe I reached out to NBC Sports to get a comment from them. And I got a comment, but it didn't really explain why they did this. But the why is really they want people to subscribe to both cable and Peacock TV, and not cut the cord, so you still get your NBCSN. You still keep Comcast happy, which is the parent company of NBC Universal, and at the same time you're subscribing to Peacock TV, and then you're basically paying them twice for the complete coverage of the Premier League. Oh, Kartik, I know you're a big Peacock TV fan, but I'm sure this one was another reason to be upset with that service.
Yeah, and I think the most important thing, Chris, to understand is that NBC sets certain expectations for the fans and for people who buy these add-ons or these OTT services. So with NBC Sports Gold, they set an expectation. People complained about the price, but it was pretty consistent. Now with Peacock, we've seen things change a lot. Your article on Sunday talked about the bait and switch. That's exactly what it is. They've done that now multiple times with Peacock, removing replays. There's been difficulty seeing bumper programming sometimes on Peacock, replays disappearing, games that are on demand disappearing. It's advertised like a normal streaming service, but you can't pause matches. You can't rewind in match. If you leave the Peacock app, you're out. Basically, you have to reload everything. Unlike if you leave the Disney Plus app, Disney Plus isn't a good comparison here. ESPN Plus is a better example, right? Same company. You come back right in, and you're at the same match you were at. Same thing with CBS All Access. So they've set expectations to where Peacock is this incredible thing that you're going to be able to consume the Premier League the same way you were able to consume it on Sports Gold, NBC Sports Gold, which you did have to pay more for, in fairness, than Peacock, or a Live Extra before on the spillover channels, and how you consume it on NBCSN, CNBC, USA, wherever you watch it on NBC over the air. And it's not. It's something completely different, and they are not consistent with what they deliver. So, yeah, I think it's a big problem, and bait and switch is the right word. I loved your headline there.
All right, so let's move on to the next news item, and this is a big one. So every year, towards the end of the year, one of the industry writers from Sports Business Daily does his predictions for the next year, for the next 12 months. and that reporter is John O'Rand, who's well respected within the industry. And it's something that oftentimes, just as some inside information, oftentimes some of these predictions he's making are based on information he knows. So oftentimes when you see predictions for the next year, not just John, but other people, they're predicting things, but they have heard something, or there's some truth to the actual prediction. It's not them just spitballing and going, okay, this is what I think for 2021. It's based on some intelligence, some information, and sometimes it may pan out to be different or wrong or may change. But having said that, let me read out two of his predictions, and these are big ones. So prediction number one, late in the year, which would be the end of 2021, think November or December of 2021, NBC will shut down its sports channel and move NHL and Premier League programming to USA Network and Peacock. The move is part of a strategy to grow NBC's streaming service while keeping its big entertainment channel relevant in a cord-cutting world. The move creates a glut of smaller programming like car shows and dog shows in the media marketplace. So Kartik, John O'Rand is predicting that NBC Sports Network, NBCSN, will be gone by November or December of 2021. The interesting thing is, according to one of my sources, he mentioned to me that this is probably one of the worst kept secrets in the sports industry. There's a lot of people that believe this to be happening. It's almost like a sure thing. Of course, nothing official from NBC Sports, but this sounds legit. This sounds very likely that you can see with NBC moving so much programming to Peacock, and with all the layoffs, with COVID, with reductions in advertising and all the issues that a lot of these broadcasters are feeling. Probably the biggest one is the cord cutting, right? People getting rid of the cable in the millions and satellite in the millions. This is having an economic impact on broadcasters. So, Kartik, can you picture a world without NBCSN?
Yeah, I expect it to happen, actually. And I'm surprised Orand is saying November or December. I thought it would happen over the summer in 2021. I've said to a couple of people privately, I think this is the last year Premier League matches will be on NBCSN. This is the last year NHL matches will be on NBCSN. Based on his timeline, they actually would start a new season of both on NBCSN before the channel gets shut down. So, yeah, it is a poorly kept secret in the industry. It's almost a fait accompli at this point. So this wasn't terribly surprising to me. maybe the timing of it is a little surprising. But his second prediction, which you'll get into in a moment, Chris, was much more surprising to me. Actually, kind of shocking to me.
Yeah, shocking to me too, because he seemed really confident about this one. So, prediction number 2 is that NBC will start negotiating a new Premier League deal early in the summer. Even though other media companies will try to grab those rights, NBC will lock them up for another 6-year term. NBC will create more windows on its broadcast channel, plus run games on USA Network and Peacock, while keeping the most matches behind a paywall on Peacock. Now, the Peacock element of this, yeah, very likely, right? More and more games are going to be on Peacock starting next season, which is the last season of its current deal. What really, to me, is surprising is how confident he thinks that this is definitely NBC's going to renew this for 6 more years, especially at the same time that we're hearing that within NBC, there's a lot of question marks about the Premier League. They're not so sure. They're not really as confident about it in the future. But at the same time, though, Kartik, there's a ton of competition out there too that would just be just really gravitating towards this Premier League deal. You would think. Yeah,
I'm kind of surprised by this, as I know you are, because my assumption was that DAZN and Amazon Prime, and we saw actually this week's midweek fixtures in the Premier League are on Amazon Prime in the UK. This is a Prime Day, I guess, the Tuesday through Thursday fixtures. This match day. So I thought they were gonna make a bid to boost their streaming services in the US. Both of those entities, DAZN being maybe desperate for it, that NBC simply could not match. So this was surprising to me. I do think the factor of Comcast owning Sky might factor into this, right? That's something that was not the case the last time NBC negotiated their deal with the Premier League. In fact, at the time, Rupert Murdoch was still trying he was on the back foot by this point, but he was still trying to get full control of Sky. And then we also have Sky B, and then also there was the possibility that it would go to Disney, right? And then Comcast ended up acquiring it after all those things played out. So that the long-term relationship that the Premier League has with Sky, and the Premier League exists because of Sky. Although that having been said, they did buck the Sky owner when they went from Fox to NBC in this country. But that might give NBC a kind of a hidden advantage that we're not expecting. The other thing could be that NBC, knowing that they've got the ability to throw most of this down behind a paywall on Peacock after they shut down NBCSN, which, as I said, I believe to be a fait accompli. I think that's happening. Whether Orand is right about the timing of it, it's going to happen, in my opinion, almost totally certain of it. Maybe they need the content to throw behind the paywall to keep value in Peacock. Mm-hmm. And my other assumption would be they probably try and raise the price of Peacock at some point to match the price of services like Netflix and Amazon Prime to Comcast customers. Now, at the same time, that might put them at a bit of a disadvantage against other streaming services. Disney Plus is very cheap. By comparison, right? So there's a little bit. The thing that I find so interesting about this whole thing, Chris, the streaming wars is, and probably get into this in a article for World Soccer Talk in the near future. What I saw Amazon do to the publishing industry, book publishing industry, I think Netflix tried to do in terms of TV and network industry. And now I see maybe Disney is trying to do it, even though they own however many linear channels. So NBC, Comcast might be at a disadvantage with all this stuff, and they might just need to hang on to whatever content they have.
Yeah, the thing about NBCSN also is that they have the Olympics. So I think in many ways they want to keep those, NBC, NBCSN, and all of the NBC sister networks, keep NBCSN running until after the Olympics, and then maybe run it down a little bit, make the announcement, and then slowly but surely get ready to go ahead and change it or sell it.
I didn't think about that. I was thinking about when the Stanley Cup final was and thought they'd shut down the network after that. That's a great point.
The other thing, though, too, a lot of listeners may have noticed, and I know you noticed this, Kartik, is these midweek games and even last week's games in the Premier League, a lot of them have been on television. There's been very few of them. Very few of the big games have been on Peacock. And even for this upcoming weekend too, where you would imagine that, okay, now they go back into the Peacock swing of things and have a lot more games on Peacock. This weekend also, some of the games that were originally scheduled for Peacock have been moved to NBCSN. And I think what's happening is that NBC Sports is really focusing on trying to broadcast some more games on television to keep the Premier League happy, to keep them like, hey, look at what we're doing here. This is great. Yes, we have some of the games on Peacock, but it's usually the smaller teams. It's the late game on a Saturday. It's the early game on a Sunday. But we're really showcasing how what we provide to the Premier League in the US as far as distribution and reach and expansion, etc. And I think that's part of it too, is they know that the deal, that the actual bidding deal will start. Discussions have already started, but the actual bidding process will happen probably in the spring or summer. And they're just trying to keep the Premier League happy for the meantime. Once that deal signs, I think most of those games will be on Peacock.
Yeah, because the change has been very noticeable. And in fact, I tweeted about it, and some people came back at me, but I know you retweeted the tweet saying, hey, they're just trying to placate us because they've done such a poor job earlier in the season, putting all these games behind the paywall. You're probably right, Chris. They're trying to not placate us. They're trying to fans. They're trying to placate the Premier League.
Yep.
While discussions are ongoing, and maybe once the ink is dry on a new contract, if Oran's right, the Premier League stays in the U.S. with NBC, which again I was not my expectation coming into this cycle. If that's the case, maybe then you see them throw even more behind the paywall after that, because then they have no fear for several years.
It should still be interesting though too, because it is one of those things that you look at ESPN Plus. So ESPN Plus has gobbled up almost all the soccer rights from the last few years, and La Liga is one of the few deals that was done that they didn't get. They got almost everything else. And ESPN Plus, imagine ESPN Plus with the Premier League on there, and every single game being on ESPN Plus, maybe one game a week, kind of that Saturday game. Maybe that would be on, I don't know, ESPN2 or ESPN News, whichever. At the same time, CBS has really done well in terms of just hitting the ground running, coming out of nowhere, basically, having NWSL and then expanding into the Champions League. They would love nothing more for their Paramount Plus for next year to do a deal, knowing that the year after that, they would be actually, those Premier League games would be on Paramount Plus. That would be a must-have, kind of streaming solution that everyone would want to get if they wanted to watch the Premier League. So DAZN, I think have kind of fallen off in terms of just financial issues and a whole bunch of other problems, focusing more, kind of going all in on the fighting aspect and kind of just dropping a lot of the other sports. So it's not a done deal by any means. And at the end of the day, NBC Sports is going to listen to whoever's going to bid the most amount of money. But they're thinking long term too. At the same time, who can actually help us remain? The most popular English language soccer league in the States, and with changing times, with streaming and cord cutting and all this, is there a player that can give us both the TV side of things and also the streaming side? And I think Fox has lost a ton of money. Fox is just interested in the World Cup and U.S. men's national team and U.S. women's national team. And Major League Soccer, because those rights are combined. Outside of that, I don't think you've got any big players unless it's somebody new that comes in, such as an Amazon or a Netflix or Apple TV or someone of that size. I'm not so sure that's going to happen anytime soon. All right, Kartik, let's move on to TV ratings. Last week, we took out the crystal ball and we said, okay, all right, MLS Cup Final. We got Columbus against Seattle. Saturday night, prime time, over the air, Fox. What will that viewing number be? You said 1.25 million. I thought you were crazy. I said 750,000. You thought I was crazy. I said maybe it'll end up somewhere in between. It ends up being 1.07 million. Kartik, I think this weekend you should probably play the lottery. Yours came close, a lot closer than what mine was.
Yeah, it came closer, but still, I guess we said you signed off saying it'll split the difference, right? Because we were so far apart, and it basically did that. Closer to mine. I'll take credit for that. Thank you, but I think it split the difference. I think that there was probably less interest in this matchup, and although Seattle was playing, which usually stimulates people, but there was no Atlanta. So the last time the match was on Fox, I know MLS has been pounding their chest about this being one of the highest rated MLS Cup Finals in the last 10 years. As you and I have pointed out, the highest rated MLS Cups traditionally were the first several years of the league, right? And then there was a huge drop off in the 2000s. But the last MLS Cup that was on Fox, which did include Atlanta and also included Seattle, had about 50 million. About 500,000 more viewers.
Yeah, it's
on Fox.
1.5 million in 2018. So comparing those numbers, comparing the 2018 number to the 2020 number, it's down 32%. Having said that, it's a lot of sports TV ratings in general have been down. It's been a crazy year with COVID. I watched the game, actually, and I enjoyed it. I really did. I thought that Seattle didn't show up. I mean, they made some really poor mistakes defensively and in midfield. But Columbus, all 3 goals they scored were beautiful, great finishing. The atmosphere at the Crew Stadium was fantastic. The pre-game with Rob Stone, Alexi Lalas, and Mo Edu was okay. It was pretty good. The halftime interview with Don Garber, it's like, I don't even know why they bother bringing them on for these types of games, because it's always softball questions and softball answers, and you really hardly ever learn anything or find out anything interesting. I would rather them analyze the game itself rather than talk to the commissioner, but I guess it's tradition. But the game itself was great. I enjoyed the game. Looking at the numbers a little bit more closely too, Kartik. So if you combine the Spanish number with the number on Fox for this MLS 2020 final, it was 1.5 million. And the Spanish language viewership was flat compared to last year. So this year, Unimas averaged 459,000 viewers. Last year, Univision had 447,000. But so when you combine those numbers, it's 1.5 million viewers, which is decent. I mean, it definitely was much better than I thought it would be. And it's been a difficult year for Major League Soccer. Hopefully next year will be better. There's so many issues still with the league in terms of just the vaccine and the COVID and attendances, and just it's all over the place. Now, as far as some of the other numbers, Kartik, the Manchester Derby, 1.3 million on this one, NBC and Telemundo. But the big number was when you combine both legs of the Liga MX playoff final, both the home and away leg, combined was 4.1 million for Club Lyon against Pumas on Univision. So I think the first game was 1.7 million and the second game was 2.4 million. Just some massive numbers there for soccer in the USA.
Yeah, and I misspoke. 2018 was Portland and Atlanta. So the MLS Cups have included Seattle, or 4 of the last 6, and then 2 of the last 6 have included Portland. So there's always been a Pacific Northwest team in the last 6 MLS Cups. So I think that makes it a little easier to compare ratings, because those 2 clubs probably have the most massive national following of any MLS clubs. But it was Portland in 2018, not Seattle. I realized that right after I said it.
Sure. All right, listener mailbag. First up is Brian. Brian says, have you guys talked about the Saturday and Sunday show available through ESPN Plus for the Bundesliga? The production quality is really high. Feels like the end of the year highlights package. Really impressive. It has created a way into the Bundesliga for me by providing context and storylines. Kartik, I haven't seen this. Have you?
Yeah, and it's phenomenally done. It's a Bundesliga package, but it's something that again we didn't get on Fox, or we got it, but it was on 3 days later, or it was on Fox Soccer Plus, or some such thing. So it's good, especially for fans who don't know the league and aren't steeped in the culture of the league. I think this, in addition to the mini documentaries that they've had Derek Ray produce, and hopefully there'll be a few more of those, have helped. Maybe not necessarily the way the success NBC had year one. Remember, for year one of the Premier League, they were able to kind of sell the culture of English football and the Anglophilia of even pop culture to the league to get a lot of people to become fans. I don't think ESPN has been quite that successful yet with the Bundesliga, but they're making some small steps that are helping create more context for newer fans and understand the culture behind some of these and the histories behind some of these clubs.
Absolutely. Next up is Richard. Richard says, I am a massive Arsenal fan and thus subscribed to CBS All Access. Last week was the second time that I got caught in a sign-up loop and never got to see the game. I think the quality of the programming is great, but the app is seriously flawed. When there is a problem, there is no one to contact. Apple TV was unable to help. Please publicize this problem. Thanks for all you do. Love the podcast and the website. And Richard, what I would do too, because actually CBS All Access does have a, I believe it's a support form or a support email address, but if something like that happens again, just post it in the comments section at worldsoccertalk.com, and we'll reply with the link or with the email address to help you try to kind of have that issue resolved. And I agree, it's very difficult to find that information for a lot of these services, Peacock TV included. I mean, all of them pretty much. It's really difficult to actually reach out to them. Some of them have Twitter addresses, but they don't respond. But anyway, let us know. Just post us in the comments section, anyone, if you do run into issues, and we can definitely help you out as best as we can. Next,
so with me,
go ahead.
I've had a problem with my CBS All Access on Apple TV. Once I had a problem where I didn't have a sign-in problem, but then when I tried to access a Europa League match, it started asking for my credentials and then booting me out. So something a little bit similar. And then the next time I went in, this was one of the 1 o'clock Eastern time matches on one of the Europa League match days. I went in at 3 o'clock. I just gave up on whatever match I was trying to watch. 3 o'clock, I went in and had no problem. And again, I watch it through Apple TV, so it may have just been a temperamental thing. It might have been for that particular day. But yeah, follow Chris's advice with that and let us know.
Next up is Greg. Greg says, hello. I've been reading the blog for a number of years, just started listening to the pod. In general, I think you're spot on about the general decline in quality of NBC's studio shows. Not replacing Neil Ashton and Steve Bauer has hurt in terms of the on-the-ground coverage in the UK. If the analysts aren't going to do lots of their own original reporting, they need to include people who do. He says, he goes on to say, I disagree a bit on losing Kyle Martino in terms of analytical quality relative to Tim Howard. They're different, but I don't see Howard as bad, and always kind of thought that Martino talked to shade too much, but that's just my taste. I like that Howard has a more recent take on playing in the league, and especially his years with Moyes add value to any comments regarding West Ham, for example. Also, I get the sense he still talks to people back in the UK. He's mentioned that in passing, but overall, I like him as an analyst. The one area I think it's unfair to knock is his delivery. Another letter in the December 10th pod got at that. He's got Tourette's and OCD, which impacts his speech. If you guys are going to bring up listener letters that criticize his delivery style, I think it's fair to mention what he's worked hard to overcome. Other than that, keep up the good work. And Kartik, I'd totally forgotten about Tourette's and OCD with Tim. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I had. So thank you for bringing that up, Greg. And also, I have to say, you're spot on about the Moyes comments, because those who know me know I'm a big David Moyes fan. I'm a big proponent of him. I was a proponent of him maybe even getting interviewed for the U.S. job when the U.S. job was open, whenever it was open. I do like the fact that they have someone who has played so long for Moyes who can defend him, because there is a stereotype about Moyes, and almost a punching bag stereotype that's come out in the British media. And I hear it all the time on the Guardian podcast. I mean, again, this week, I love Jonathan Wilson, but Wilson drones on about Bielsa, and then they're taking shots at Moyes, and no one wants to defend Moyes. It's a mockable thing. Now, of course, I think West Ham had beaten Leeds, actually, but or had they, or was it a draw? I can't remember. But whatever the case, yeah, I really appreciate the fact that he defends Moyes, and he can talk about Moyes and talk about, because I will tell you, people may be shocked on this podcast to learn this because they've heard the narratives about two managers in particular, Moyes and Allardyce. Allardyce was one of the first guys in England to really put a lot of faith in sports science. And Moyes was one of the first managers in England, maybe the first, to really look at analytics the way we look at analytics now. And that's why with Everton's spending constraints that they were under during most of the time Tim Howard was at the club, Everton was always finishing in the top half. There were a couple of seasons they even finished ahead of Liverpool, their local rival, because he was finding bargains in the transfer market. He was doing things that other managers weren't doing. He was doing things that directors of football at clubs were in England that they were competing with weren't doing. So I do really appreciate that. Thank you for the note, Greg.
Yeah, and West Ham beat Leeds 2-1 in that game on Friday. But that's something else.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. It was a Friday game.
But that's something else, though, Kartik, too. Sometimes I think some of the football managers in England get beaten up a lot by the British, by the English themselves. Yeah. I mean, there is that love of managers from overseas, this kind of that romanticism, and also part of it could be too that David Moyes is Scottish, Sam Allardyce is from the north. So there's definitely that London bias where, if it's somebody that's a Londoner, maybe they have more time or more like appreciation.
Lampard,
Right.
Yeah, so there you go. I mean, they have a lot of time for Lampard. They haven't they haven't praised Scott Parker the way I think they should, but they haven't gone after him the way they would one of those guys, because he's a Londoner also. But yeah, that's a great point. Pulis is from Wales. Steve Bruce is from the Northeast. The guys they go after, we can just start picking them out. And you mentioned Big Sam is from the north, and then obviously David Moyes is Scottish. I mean, they have this stereotype. I even saw tweets today about, because we're recording this on Wednesday, about Allardyce getting the West Brom job, hitting Allardyce, and then they bring back the name Pulis. They start attacking Pulis. They start attacking Alan Pardew. He's actually a Londoner, but it's a very weird thing. They have this kind of self-hating mentality, and I think most of the guys we've just mentioned are good managers, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And I actually think I actually put Moyes and Allardyce near the very top of managers I've seen in the Premier League through the years. If you look at the jobs they've done, I think it was disastrous for Moyes that year at Sunderland, but other than that, West Ham, the first time he did okay. This time he's doing really well, and obviously Manchester United, we realize now, it was part of a deeper rot, and he didn't get the backing. He got to buy two players. One was Fellaini, who he knew. The other was Juan Mata, who he only got to work with for a few months. He didn't get to buy all the guys Van Gaal and Mourinho did, and now Solskjaer. I mean, who knows what would have happened if Moyes had the same sort of budget. I don't think he could have done any worse than those other guys I mentioned, honestly. And at Everton, I will say this again. His record at Everton speaks for itself. I know I seem to tweet this every week after West Ham gets the results, so sorry, Chris. Thank you for indulging me on this, but I guess I'll get it out on the podcast. You look at Moyes' record at Everton relative to the money they spent. I dare you to find another manager in a top European league over that period of time, that 8 years, 9 years, whatever, from the time they first qualified for Champions League 04-05 through the time he left the club to go to Man United 12-13, that got as much money, got as good results relative to the competition in the league he was in per euro or per pound as Moyes. I think he's a phenomenal manager. So I do appreciate the point about Howard. And having Howard on NBC does give some balance because maybe they would have beat up on David Moyes if he wasn't there. That's a great point.
Yeah, or if he was a Londoner, maybe they would have given him more of a chance, perhaps.
Right.
So next up is Tim Keane. Tim says, with the demise of Watford, to the Championship, I've been making use of my ESPN Plus subscription. My two biggest takeaways. Number one, the refereeing is pretty awful and the commentators even worse. As with most things, you don't miss them until you don't have them. As to the games themselves, the Championship is a difficult league to dominate, with some very good teams, and even the lesser teams are rough and ready. So from my own personal experience, it's true. The Championship is a difficult league to dominate. From this past Saturday, when Swansea beat Cardiff City, my match of the weekend, as far as my personal match of the weekend, I felt after that game, I thought, okay, Swansea have a good chance of getting promoted. Then midweek, they play Derby, who's near the bottom of the Championship, and they lose. Swansea lose convincingly, 2-0. It could have been 3-0 or 4-0. And then I'm like, okay, this is going to be a mid-table finish. It is very much an up and down league, which makes it more interesting because you never know what you're going to get. The Premier League is definitely more predictable in terms of kind of top versus bottom. But the Championship is a different story. It's a very difficult league to get through in terms of to dominate because it is so up and down. The thing about the refereeing is true. The difficulty is that there's no VAR. So the referees have no backup. They have no ability to, to look at any video. They're out there. They're doing the best that they can. And the way that the referees are assigned, it's the best referees go to the Premier League. The ones that make a couple of mistakes may get demoted to the Championship, or some of the up-and-coming ones are in the Championship. For the most part, the referees are pretty good. But if there was VAR in the Championship, if there was a VAR in the Champions League, right, or the Europa League, things would be very different. The referees are trying to do the best that they can. I don't think they're awful. I just think it's difficult not having the backup or having the help to make the right decisions, even though with VAR we know that doesn't happen all the time. Last but not least, go ahead. Mr. Championship expert.
Yeah, I think those things even out over a period of time. As I said last week on the show, I'm on
I think so
Talk
too.
Sport a lot, covering the Championship, and they bring me on usually once a week, and that's always my thing because the host is always asking me, hey, there was this controversial call in Bristol City versus Watford, etc. These things tend to even out. 46 match season, although it's frustrating if you're a fan of a club, and Tim, it's probably frustrating as a Watford fan because there are certainly some matches this season where there have been some odd calls involving them, but I think they tend to even out over the season. Long season, it's a slog, it's a tough league, but it's a fun league. Towards the end of the season, as I said last year on this podcast, the Championship was the thing to watch the last few weeks of the season. It was far greater drama than the Premier League or the Bundesliga or La Liga, whatever. It was great.
Yeah, and also Watford involved the midweek against Brentford with some controversial decisions in that game with offside and red card. So it almost feels like watching the Premier League of old, where you're right. I mean, for the most part, some bad mistakes go against you, and then in the weeks after that, some bad mistakes go for you in your turn. Last but not least, Turfit says, MLS commissioner for a day thought, thinking about NASCAR biggest event being the first event of the year, and that's golf's biggest events, US Open, Masters, PGA Championship, spread throughout the year. Why does the MLS Cup have to be played as soon as the season is over? Why not extend the regular season into December and then move the MLS Cup to the following season during the month of August? This is when MLS gets its best TV ratings and I think would drive ratings even higher. Teams not in the MLS Cup would be able to play friendlies against European teams during their preseason training, and I would also expand the CONCACAF Champions League to include at least 32 teams, but prefer 40 teams with 5 teams per group in group stage, with group play starting in early spring and knockout stages played in the fall. Also start a second CONCACAF league similar to the Europa League to include even more teams. Between both these tournaments, every club in MLS and Liga MX would be involved in an international tournament, and even more clubs from Central America, and mostly turn the focus of MLS to football. So my response to this, Kartik, is who's paying for this? Because even with the CONCACAF Champions League, it doesn't get a lot of TV viewing figures or a lot of interest on television. The broadcasters that do sign up to show these games, Fox and Univision, are paying decent amounts of money, but they're not paying in the Champions League type of money. In the Champions League and UEFA Champions League, you've got all these European broadcasters who are salivating at the prospect of trying to win the rights to broadcast these games. And I think in North America and Central America, yes, there's interest in Mexico, especially to watching the CONCACAF Champions League. But for most part, I think most Americans or fans of Major League Soccer tune out. They don't watch the CONCACAF Champions League because the teams keep on losing all the time. There's not much of an incentive to keep on watching unless you're the type of person who likes seeing negative things happen in terms of the teams losing and doing poorly. So I think Turfit's ambitions to change the schedule, but to expand things and have every MLS club participating. And we haven't even discussed travel costs and travel implications. And I think this would be a nightmare scenario. Go ahead, Kartik.
I think it would be tough.
Yeah,
I think it would be tough.
Yeah,
it's something that's been talked about. It's not anything new, but there's never been the sort of sponsor interest to actually make this happen.
Yeah, it'd be a good one for a football manager. I mean, you mentioned the sponsorship. I mean, up until recently, the CONCACAF Champions League didn't even have anyone to broadcast the games. I think some of the games they ended up broadcasting on Yahoo or... Yeah,
I watched a few games on Yahoo, and Go90 had it at one point, Go90 app.
So there's been so little interest that they had a tough time even finding anyone to pay anything to actually broadcast the games.
I was actually surprised Fox committed to it the way they did. And who knows if that was to fill a void because they're losing all this. They've lost all these other soccer properties, European soccer properties. But that was surprising even given the lack of interest. As we're recording now, Champions League is about to kick off. Atlanta United playing, and I just don't think there's much interest in it.
Yeah, especially the way that they're playing these days. All right, so we want you to have your say. If you have any questions for us, want to reach out to us with any feedback, observations, disagreements, agreements, or questions about streaming or watching soccer on television, you can always reach us via email through web at worldsoccertalk.com, as well as facebook.com/worldsoccertalk, and on Twitter at worldsoccertalk. Plus, of course, you can always post your comments on worldsoccertalk.com. Next week, we're going to try to do this podcast in person. We have to see if we can figure things out and try to see if Kartik and I can meet up in person, maybe take some pictures, maybe do a little bit of video, but do the podcast in person. So knock on wood, this one next week might be a little bit different. We're going to try our best to make that happen. It's been a while since I've seen Kartik and likewise. But Kartik, where can they find you on Twitter if they want to follow what you've been saying over the next week or so?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at KKFLA737.
All right. Don't forget to get the World Soccer Talk podcast every Thursday on your favorite podcast player, whether it's Amazon Music, Spotify, Pandora, YouTube, Stitcher, iTunes, TuneIn, Audio Boom, Overcast, and worldsoccertalk.com. If you like the show, share it with your friends on social media and give us a review on iTunes. And Kartik, heading into another weekend of football from around the world, what should they do?
Enjoy your football.